Of course, my eye won't quit watering. God. When your body works against you, every single day. Every single day.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you new here, my name is Donna, and for those of you not new, thank you so much for continuing to come back and support my channel. I appreciate all of you so very much. Today I'm doing the next installment of my palette roulette series, in which I let an app choose a palette. I utilize it throughout the week. I come back to you, I show you some swatches, I show you some pictures, I talk to you about my experiences with the palette, and we pick a new palette. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, you're in the right place. I appreciate you being here. Today we are talking about a drugstore palette. Wah, wah. I never ever have drugstore items in my lineup because I am more of a bougie bitch and really prefer like just high-end stuff. So I was actually really excited. I did pick this palette up myself. It is one that I saw in my Walmart and I was like, what? That's beautiful. And I went and purchased it. It's $10 and this is what it is. It is the Profusion Wanderlust palette, and Profusion has been kind of on my mind. Actually, I think it was like on my list of brands to try, kind of quasi on my list of brands to try, not one that I really brought forth, but one that I really wanted to try. I'd heard so many great things about Profusion and hadn't tried them. My aunt bought me a Profusion eye primer that I love. I put it in my Shop My Stash. I just got done using it not that long ago, a couple days, I think maybe yesterday. I got the last little bits of it out of there. It's a fantastic eye primer. And she also bought me a eyeshadow palette, but I haven't tried that one yet. This one I saw around Christmas time in my local Walmart and I did pick it up. So this is the Profusion Wanderlust palette. This is what the palette looks like. You guys can see it's very like leaning green but very jewel tone inspired. It does come in at $10, y'all. $10 for 21 shadows. On the Profusion website, this has a 5-star rating. I actually think it's 4.9. As I looked at it a little bit closer, it does say 4.9. I do have 5 stars on my page, but there are 178 reviews on it. It is 4.9 stars. On the Walmart website, it comes in at 4.1 stars with 28 reviews. I would say this is probably, if I had to give it a rating, I would give it that 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, somewhere in that area. While I believe that this is a really great palette, as I said earlier, I'm kind of a bougie bitch. So it doesn't like wholeheartedly rank up there with some of my more expensive, more finely milled, more beautiful powders out there, but it is really good. So with that said, this does have 21 shades. These are considered eyeshadows and pigments. There are 4 of them in this palette that are considered pigments, and they are Regal, which is right here, Nimbus, which is this guy here, which shocks me that this is called a pigment because it's not super pigmented, if I'm honest. Then we have Retro and Go Girl. So these 4 right here are considered pigments. I believe just the shades that have to come together to make purples work really well create the fact that these are pigments in the palette. It's an around the world theme with like big, bold, vibrant tones of jewel tones. There are 8 mattes. I would challenge that. I would say that there are 7, and we'll get there in a second. And 11 shimmers or satiny shades, some of which are super chunky glitter-like shades that many don't work worth a poop. So there's that. That is why I say that this palette doesn't really 100% rank up there in that 4.5, 4.8 star rating, because I just don't firmly believe that they are a 4.8, 4.9 star palette. With that being said, they are decent, and it's only $10. It's only $10. So let's talk about this for a little bit. This is cruelty free, which I think is amazing. This works really well with a primer. Not so much without a primer. What I would say about that too is that if you're going to use a primer with these shades, you need to definitely make sure that you have mattified that primer. Make sure that it is dried down, because if you do not and it is tacky in the ever so slightest manner, these are going to stick to that primer and you will not be able to blend them out whatsoever. So you'll know that I don't like putting powder on my face in a way that is necessary to mattify things. So I had a really hard struggle bus of a time with this palette to some extent. The shades really do like to stick. They're not super blendable if they go on and they just stick in the one spot. So you definitely have to powder your primer to set it down. Otherwise, these aren't going to blend for you. The shadows do blend on a dry base. They do blend fairly well. I think that they blend beautifully into each other. They build beautifully on top of one another. That really shocked me, honestly, for drugstore pricing. I have tried some drugstore palettes in the past, but typically they're like e.l.f. Milani has a really decent formula for the most part, but e.l.f. isn't fantastic, and I know from experience with e.l.f. they don't really build very well. They don't really blend very well. These do. These are amazing for building and blending for sure. There is a significant amount of fallout with these shadows. They also are super powdery in the pan, so you're going to create kind of a bit of a mess, not only in your palette, but also kind of all over your face. I know yesterday I used this shade, and this is one of the flaky shades that we'll talk about in a minute, and then I closed this up, and when I came back in this morning, this shade was all over the palette. It's like it had exploded, and I don't know why. A lot of drugstore shadows that I've tried in the past really are firmly pressed. These are not, and because of that, they do create quite a bit of powderiness in the pan. They also create quite a bit of fallout on your face. I do my eyes first every single time, regardless of palette, regardless of, you know, my experiences with them and the performance of the shadows. I do my eyes first, always. And I'm thankful with this palette because my cheeks were covered with whatever shadow I was using. The fallout is more apparent with the darker mattes than it is with any other shade, except for the really chunky glitters, or not glitters necessarily, but the really chunky shadows in here. The darker shadows, so these four right in here, do stain fairly well. None of this that I'm telling you is a deal breaker for me, because I deal with those with even some of my higher end shadows. Fallout isn't a make or break for me. Staining isn't a make or break for me. What I will say is the purples in this palette and this pink right here do stain quite significantly. This eye look on my face is this way because I barely tapped in and used some of this pink in an eye look that I did yesterday, and I had pink staining clear up to my brow bone. And I've washed my face twice since having that eye look on my face yesterday. The chunky metallics in here do really emphasize texture, especially this one here, which if you can get it on your eye, you're golden. The other one that really emphasizes texture is this one here, and it's not super chunky, but it does emphasize texture a lot. I would also say that this one here is slated as a matte, but this is most definitely not a matte shadow. So this is a really like pretty yellow, like really pale yellow tone, and when you put it on, it looks matte. But the closer you get to it, it's very sheeny, and when you put it into an eye look, it's definitely not matte. It has this like sheeniness to it that transforms everything underneath it into a beautiful sheen. So there were many days, it took me a couple days to figure out that this was not a matte pale yellow, and there were a couple days that I would put it into my brow bone area and like blend it down because I thought it was a yellow matte, blend it down into the rest of the parts of like my coloring out here in the like tail of my eye look, and it was very starkly shimmery. And I was like, I didn't put a shimmer in my brow bone. What is going on right now? The other day I was blending it over the top of the blue in the palette, and I saw the transformation of it go from a matte blue to a sheeny aqua. And I was like, oh, it's that yellow. Fantastic. I would argue that that is not a matte. It is listed as a matte, but it's not a matte. I'll just tell you that. The mattes in this palette, like I said, there are 8 of them. They are going to be these 4 shades here, or sorry, these 3 shades here, these 3 shades here, this one, and this one, like I said, is listed as a matte. I don't think it's a matte. Everything else in the palette is very, very shimmery. We have this one, which is a beautiful, beautiful light champagne brow bone shade. It's a great inner corner shade. This one is just a wee bit too gold for me. These are beautiful, but this one is super chunky, and you can see that in like just the finger swatch. I don't know if you guys can see the chunkiness of that shadow. It flakes everywhere. It gets all over your face. So there are 21 shadows in here, so I'm not going to swatch them all. It is beautiful, and it goes on definitely better with your finger than it does with a brush, but it just emphasizes so much texture, and it has really a clear base underneath it. So even though it's got this light, like beautiful powder blue look to it in the palette, it definitely doesn't show up that way on your eye look. Another one that is one of the chunky ones is this Love Story one here. I do have this one all over my eyelid, so is the majority color on my eyelid. I do like it. It also has a little bit of a clearer base, or more transparent base, so you do have to build it. And I think that's what I can say about the chunky colors, is you have to build them quite extensively to have them show up in the fashion that they do here in the pan, but also any kind of color payoff that you want on your eye. I would say that because you have to build them up the way that you do, that is why they emphasize texture. I really, really loved this shade, and this is also one of the more chunky ones, but this one was my favorite shade to use. It is so pretty, a little bit duochrome-y. It is just beautiful on an eye look. I do have an eye look that I wasn't super pleased with because of the dark blue in here and how it blended out. I did take a picture of it, but this was in that eye look. And then I have another one that this was on the center of the eye look, and it was kind of like a halo eye. So pretty. It was so pretty. I felt like a real mermaid in that moment. You guys can see that this shade up here, I've got little white chunkies everywhere. I don't know if you can see that actually. I'm saying that. The other one, chunky one, is Nimbus, and this one is also considered a pigment. And this is why I say I'm not certain as to why this is a pigment. It really does have kind of a semi-clear base. All of them really do. Semi-clear base. You really do have to build it up to get any kind of pigmentation out of it on your eye look the way that you want it to look. So it's odd to me that both of those are considered, or well, that pink one is considered a pigment, a pressed pigment. It's very strange to me. So the one that I had the most trouble with in this palette is this blue. I think it's me, honestly. I have a lot of problems with blues. You guys saw that from the Lunar Beauty Eternal Eclipse review that I just did. I by no means thought that that palette was awful, but I did have a lot of struggle with the blues. I had a lot of struggle with this blue as well. I think it's me. I also think somewhat it had to do with my eye primer that I was using, if I'm honest. I do believe that all of these shades are really, really pretty. I think that this palette, the pigmentation in it really does rival that of some of my maybe lower quality high end. So like I would choose a Profusion palette over a Too Faced palette probably any day. But Too Faced is not a brand that I think does consistency well, nor does shadows well. They're just not one of my favorite brands. They're not one that I go for on a day-to-day basis. Nothing that they bring out really wows me in the not only marketing factor, but also application factor. So I do have a handful of Too Faced palettes that I love, but I would pick this palette over a Too Faced palette any day as far as my collection goes. These browns are beautiful. What I would say is that I like a palette that's a little more 50-50. And the fact that there were only 8 mattes in this palette, well, 7, because I'm challenging this one. The fact that there were only 7 mattes in this palette is a little bit discouraging. Also, I would say that this palette leans very heavily green, and there's not a green matte in here, and I thought that that was kind of odd. I wanted for a green matte while I was using it, for sure. I would also say that the lightest matte, because this one isn't a matte, again, I will die going to my grave saying this is not a matte. Because this one is not a matte, the lightest matte in this palette are these browns here, and none of those are a great, like, brow bone shade. None of them are a great, like, inner corner shade if you want to go with a matte brow bone, matte inner corner. These aren't necessarily perfect for blending out anything. These aren't necessarily perfect for crease color for all skin tones, so there's that. I also want to say that I have to give this brand props because these palettes not only function very well, they have a very nice magnetic closure. I mean, the packaging is what it is. It's super cheap. I love that you can see through it, though, because it is such a large palette. You can see through it and figure out what you're doing with your life just by a glance. But they also come with a brush. Now, what I'm going to say about this brush is probably going to, like, irritate some people because I don't think it's spectacular. Pause. I do know that this palette cost $10, and I do know that this palette cost $10 and it came with a brush. That is amazing. But first time use, this brush fell apart in the middle of me doing an eye look. This pink on there is on there because I was doing my very first eye look with this brush and it fell apart and I had to find a different brush. I didn't even clean it because it fell apart. That makes me sad. With that said, I could put some glue in there and just stick it back together, but I have to be honest, it's not worth it to me. I have an ass ton of brushes, so this one brush isn't a make or break for me, but I wish I had gotten the experience, and I have a couple other Profusion palettes, so maybe I will, but I wish I had gotten the experience from this brush that I hear so many people talking about the fact that it is a fantastic brush. I wish I had seen that. I just didn't, because it immediately fell apart. So this is going to go into my garbage or my beauty empties, and we'll revisit it in a year when I do my year of empties, which PS is coming this week. I hope that you guys are going to stay tuned for that. Please hit that notification bell if you are not on notifications yet so that you don't miss that. But I do think that this is a decent palette, and I do think that I will continue to keep Profusion on my radar, continue to look at their palettes as, you know, something that is great. I did struggle with this, but there are 21 shades in here, so most of the time, unless you have a really consistent formula, there might be 21 shades in an eyeshadow palette. You're gonna have some struggles with 1, maybe 2, and dependent on how you put on makeup or your makeup preferences, there are going to be some shadows that you like and dislike in almost every single palette that you own. I will tell you, I won't use this shadow again. It was awful, and I probably won't use this blue again, but every other shade in this palette was just spectacular. So I showed you a couple shades. This one is actually a really good shade also, like I said, for brow bone or inner corner. This green, look at how perfectly that matches my hair. I was stoked. And then this green also, such a pretty green. And then this blue. You guys, I'm just floored at how beautifully pigmented these shadows are. And you can get this palette for $10. I mean, you can't beat that. You just can't. Let me know if you guys want to see a swatch party on this palette, because I will definitely show it to you, but I'm trying, my channel future this year is to try and really rein in all the chatter that I do in a video so that you guys are seeing all of me, because there's so much that I edit out, but also so that I'm not droning on and on and on about silly things. And when a palette is this big, I just don't feel like it would be conducive to like really swatching them, because I like to talk about each shadow too and how it turned out. You guys can see the eye looks that I created. So if you want a swatch party on this palette, please let me know. I will do it. I will for you. But most of the time I do come here, I do give you some swatches. I just don't feel like I can do 21 eyeshadows in a short amount of time today. We are going to pick another palette, and I am super stoked because most of the palettes left on this, Decide Now app are palettes I haven't used. So I'm really excited about it. All right. So for those of you who do not know, I do have a Samsung Note 9, and the app that I got from my Android Play Store is this. It is called the Decide Now app. In the beginning, I put all of my palettes into this app, and as we utilize them through palette roulette, or I declutter them in my system, I do pull them out. As we get new palettes in and I've hauled them with you, I do put them in, and I'm excited. So let's press the button. Ooh, we got the Juvia's Place Nomad palette. This is fairly new to my collection. Let me go get it. I will be right back. All right, guys, this is the next palette. This is, I'm stuck on my kimono. This is the palette that we will be discussing next week. This is the Juvia's Place Nomad palette. This is what it looks like. And then you open it up, and these are the tones in here. I'm actually kind of excited because these are like, oh, I just stuck my finger in it. These are like very Pantone color of the year inspired almost. So yellows, grays, grungy greens, and this really just speaks to my grunge heart. So I'm really excited to use this palette, and if I need some extra colors, I will of course utilize my single shadows, which are of course right there, and you guys know that I do that, but I am so excited to use this palette. Juvia's Place is one of my favorite. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for coming to join us today. I really appreciate you being here. I know that you don't have to be, that you choose to watch my videos, and that just warms my heart so much. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that if you did, you're considering giving it a big thumbs up. It really does help our channels out here, helps us grow, helps us be seen, helps YouTube see it. I also hope that you liked it, or me, enough that you're considering subscribing to my channel before you go. I would love to have you along for my crazy midlife crisis, and if you do that, please don't forget to hit that notification bell. It will notify you every single time I upload, and I would hate for you to miss anything. So again, thank you guys so much for coming. I hope that 2021 is being kind to you. I hope that you and yours are well, that you all are staying safe and keeping healthy and wearing your masks when you're out in public, because we need to wear our masks if for no other reason but to protect ourselves. And I hope that you guys are loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye everyone.